Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to look at TTRPG mental health survey done on StartPlaying.Games. Rob Weiland, a prominent member of the RPG community, has unfortunately passed away. Asmodee takes over the Lord of the Rings tabletop rights. Chaosium has a big sale on DriveThruRPG. The Designers and Dragons crowdfunding campaign has begun. Glass Cannon, a streaming show, a streaming game, switching over to Shadowdark, mentioned a lot of stuff from the Lazy Dungeon Master. Project Sigil, the 3D VTT for Wizards of the Coast, is no more. We're going to do a spotlight of the Phantasy Star role-playing game by my friend Rich Lescaflair. I'm going to give some highlights and give a bit of the aftermath of the Gamehole Con 2025, my attendance at Gamehole Con 2025. And we're going to cover more questions from the Patreon Q&A, all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. I was out last week. There was no RPG Talk Show last week. There were, however, 2 special episodes of the Lazy RPG Talk Show in which I recorded 2 panels that I was on. One of them was the beautiful mess of 5e, and the other panel was on lazy GM tips. You can find both of those panels either on the podcast or on my YouTube channel broadcast last week. I did one on Tuesday and one on Friday. So instead of a normal RPG talk show, you got those 2 panels. They were really fun to do. This was at Gamehole Con week before last. So really, really fun to do. But I'm catching up. You can tell I am catching up on the rest of the news that has occurred in that time. So 2 weeks ago, I published the article, Running Ravenloft with Shadowdark. So I am actually doing this coming Saturday. I like to run Ravenloft every year for Halloween with new players. I got a bunch of new players coming next week. It's going to be really fun. And we are running Ravenloft with Shadowdark. I really love running Ravenloft with Shadowdark. I think I've done it twice now. I can't remember if I've done it once or twice, but boy, did it fit. And so I wrote an article last year about how to run i6 Ravenloft, the original i6 Ravenloft, using Shadowdark. And my plan is that every year around this time, I'm going to edit and republish that article because I think it's such a fun way to enjoy the game. It's such a fun way to enjoy Shadowdark. It's such a fun way to enjoy Ravenloft, and it's a great time of year. I don't know if it's true everywhere, but around where I live, boy, people are going all in on the Halloween decorations, all kinds of creepy stuff. And Halloween is my favorite holiday of the year. I love Halloween, and the grimmer and gorier and scarier it is, the happier I am. And I've got neighbors around me with giant prismatic spiders, and I'm all in on the huge skeletons, right? Everyone's like, oh, this new huge skeleton trend. I don't know. They can't be big enough as far as I'm concerned. So I'm really happy with Halloween, and I love Halloween. And as part of Halloween, I love running Ravenloft with Shadowdark. So it's really, really fun. So yeah, so that article was published. I did not do a readings and reflections of that article because I've already done a readings and reflections where I read aloud that article a year ago. So you can go listen to that one if you want. If you're part of the Patreon, you can go back and listen to that one if you want. But you can read the article on slyflourish.com. Last week, I published the article Frameworks Fuel Creativity, where I was talking about this idea of adventure frameworks and how they are not restrictive in our abilities to make fun games, but actually open up some of our creativity by giving us really strong models that we know work well for RPGs, and then we can customize those frameworks and those models to fit the kind of game we run. This article was published on Sly Flourish. You could get it both as a newsletter. You could have gotten it as a newsletter. You're not going to get it as a newsletter now, but you can get future articles as a newsletter by subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. I also did a readings and reflections of this on the Sly Flourish Patreon, where I read the article aloud and then spend 7 to 10 minutes kind of talking about the background of the article, what I was thinking, some other ideas that I have and stuff like that. So it's a great way if you want a director's commentary of the Sly Flourish articles and you want the article read to you so you can listen to it on a podcast in your car instead of getting it in text. You can get that from the Sly Flourish Patreon. Next week's article is Improv versus Prep. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening to the podcast later on Monday, this article has already been published, but the article has not yet been published as of this recording. And it's available on slyflourish.com. Again, you could get it as a newsletter by subscribing to the newsletter. Link is down in the show notes. You should subscribe. It's absolutely free. I don't know why you wouldn't. It's totally free, and you get a lot of free, cool stuff for doing so. And will be available on the slyflourish.com website. And next week will be the future readings and reflections available on Patreon. The idea behind here is how do we figure out what we should be improvising and what we should be prepping? How do we test it? How do we say to ourselves, what kind of stuff do I need to prepare ahead of time? And what kind of stuff can I do I feel comfortable improvising at the table? And my general feeling is we could probably improvise more than we think. I bet you that's the case for a lot of people. So how do you test it? How do you try it out? And what do you do to prep something and decide, did I use it, or not prep something and then say, boy, I really wish I had that. That's kind of the idea behind the improv versus prep. So that is next week's Sly Flourish article. So that is the Sly Flourish news. Lots of fun things going on. I'm working on a couple big projects that I'm excited about, and always working on smaller projects for the Sly Flourish Patreon. I'm going to talk about one of those a little bit later. And of course, writing articles and doing fine shows and videos like this. Really good time. Over on EN World, they gave the results or discussed the results of a StartPlaying.Games poll on TTRPGs and mental health, which I thought was very, very interesting. It was a survey of 1,000 TTRPG players in the United States who are using StartPlaying.Games. So obviously this isn't representative of the entire RPG hobby. It is really those who are willing to answer the survey, 1,000 RPG players willing to answer the survey on StartPlaying.Games in particular. So this is focused on online play. It is focused on those who are most likely paying for game masters. So there's definitely like a slice of the material for this that's worth considering, but some really interesting results that fit a feeling that I have and something that I feel very strongly about, which is that RPGs save our lives. That RPGs, us running tabletop role-playing games with our friends, is extremely important to our health, or can be very, very beneficial and very, very important for our health. And I think some of the responses that you find from the survey here, I think meet that. So some interesting results. 76% of players saying that TTRPGs help them process trauma. 28% indicated they developed attractions with other players outside the game itself. 75% credited games with maintaining their real-life friendships. 75% said the games are helping them with their maintain real-life friendships. 34% said that they played a campaign organized for mental health, and the majority find games stress relieving. 44% said they played games to relieve stress. 41% said they do so for mental health support, and 31% to process trauma or for emotional growth. There's overlap between those, which is why that is higher than 100%. Interesting, TTRPGs, the number of people who met close friends through TTRPGs increased over the decades. Those categorized as boomers answering that 65% of them made close friends via their hobby. 78% of Gen Z responded that they made close friends. Only 5% of people said that RPGs did not help them maintain friendships at all. When it comes to romance, 44% of respondents dated or are dating, one assumed that includes marriages, somebody that they met through gaming. I am in that category. My wife and I met through the game EverQuest 25 years ago, or some more than 25 years ago, early 90s or late 90s. We met in the online game EverQuest, but also both turned out to be big D&D nerds. When we got married, she brought the huge collection of first edition D&D stuff. So we've been gaming together ever since. Now we are two partners in a company that publishes RPG games. So, it's a study of TTRPGs, doesn't indicate that there's something particularly special about gaming. This is written in the article on EN World, which you can find linked in the show notes. We don't know how it compares to dog walkers, rock climbing, book clubs, or musicians or other things. I feel, so this data I think is really important. And I personally feel like, and I don't think this is a stretch, that TTRPGs, tabletop role-playing games, are in a really unique position of bringing small groups of people together regularly with a catalyst, an important catalyst to do so regularly, that allows us to break away from a lot of the other elements going on in our lives and be kids together again. And I think that is really unique to tabletop role-playing games and really valuable to us for our mental health. And I think that there are there's a lot of evidence that kind of points to that. But when you think about it, it's like getting together with people we know is absolutely important. Building social connections and maintaining social connections with other people is absolutely vital to our lives. But sometimes it's hard to do so. And I've talked about this on the show before too. As we get to be adults, it's harder to do so. And I remember hearing like groups of mothers getting together saying, I like getting together with the other mothers, but all we ever talk about is our kids, right? And I feel like when you have a reason to get together, it's easier to get together when you have a clear reason to get together. And that reason could be playing tabletop role-playing games. But then the other thing that TTRPGs do is they tap into a part of our brain that's different than what we typically use in other parts of our lives, the creative aspects, that frontal lobe sort of imagination aspects. And it does so safely in a group where we're all laughing together and all having a good time. And we get to use that part of our brain to bond with our other players, building worlds together that we don't do anywhere else. You don't do it when you're playing video games together. You don't do it when you're walking dogs together. Somebody said Sly Flourish hates dog walkers. I don't. My wife is a dog walker. We love dog walkers here. I wouldn't say that dog walking is a particularly creative activity. It also isn't necessarily a social activity. Sometimes it is, sometimes it is not. But I really feel like TTRPGs are in this unique spot. And one of the reasons that I feel so strongly about this hobby as I do is because I know how it has personally enriched my life. I've talked to my friends, especially during COVID. We had lots of conversations about how important it was, even for us to get together online to play games and get away from everything else, that was really vital. You saw it during COVID where TTRPG sales were up significantly because people were definitely falling to them. The idea that TTRPGs are stronger now than they've ever been in a world that is more connected with electronics than it's ever been, and yet it is often an analog activity that even in the digital space, when you're using VTTs, the creative aspects are still all analog. It's us talking with one another. It's us doing this stuff. It's really fascinating. So, it's a true social experience that I think is absolutely vital to our lives. So I think this poll and survey really, really highlights that. So at Gamehole Con, we were doing a DM tips panel, and I found out, and Rob Weiland was going to be one of the participants of this panel of the best GM tips that we were going to offer. I got word a few days before the convention that Rob Weiland was not going to be able to attend the convention. And then I found out a few days after that Rob Weiland had passed away. Rob Weiland was he did a lot of work bringing RPGs to and discussions of RPGs with regular columns on EN World, Forbes, Geek and Sundry, and other stuff. He worked on TTRPGs, including Star Wars Saga Edition, World of Darkness, Shadowrun, and Savage Worlds. He passed away far too young. And I did not have the opportunity to know Rob, but many people I know knew Rob and thought that he brought a tremendous amount of value to this hobby. I was very sad to hear of his passing, and it was touching to hear everybody's discussions with him as a absolute fine member of this hobby that we have. And I brought up at the GM Tip Seminar, I brought up the fact that he was supposed to be on that panel, and how important his work was for the hobby overall. And that I thought that even by bringing GM tips to other game masters, got into this idea that, life is short, and it's too short for a lot of people. And our ability to spend that time with our friends around a table, enjoying our creative activity, is so important. So I wanted to honor his life for it, and sad to see him go too young. You can find an article with more information and people talking about Rob at the EN World article, which I will link in the show notes. We also found out, I think it was during Gamehole Con or right before Gamehole Con, that Asmodee, the large tabletop gaming producer, they publish a lot of tabletop games on top of board games and things like that they have. So there was I believe I'm getting this right, there's a holding company above Asmodee, and that holding company above Asmodee owned the rights for Lord of the Rings. Yeah, so Middle-earth Enterprises, which kind of was the license holder for Lord of the Rings, and Asmodee were both part of a group known as Embracer Group. And the Embracer Group, Asmodee is a publisher known for like the Settlers of Catan and Ticket to Ride, major games. So the Embracer Group handed full tabletop rights for Lord of the Rings to Asmodee. So we would assume that this includes board games, card games, all licensing involving, all gaming, tabletop gaming licensing involving Lord of the Rings material is now being managed by Asmodee. So what does this mean? Well, everybody's eyes immediately went over to Free League. Free League is the publisher of multiple Lord of the Rings RPGs, including Lord of the Rings 5e and The One Ring. And the question is, what is going to happen with that? Now, I'm not here to tell you what to do, But I'll tell you what I did, which is when I was at Gamehole Con, I immediately went over to the Free League booth and I immediately bought a physical copy of the One Ring and the Moria supplement for One Ring, which was any award-winning supplement for the One Ring. And when I bought those, I also got the PDFs of those. I think I had the PDFs for One Ring already, but I got the One Ring PDFs and the PDFs for Moria. Because I don't know if how long it's going to still be around. One of the issues with licensed, when you're using a brand license when you're using a brand license like this, when you're a third-party licensee, you may not hold the rights forever, and eventually you may stop selling that work. And One Ring is very well regarded. I've not played it, but I've read it and I've heard a lot about it, and I've heard it's very good. So I wanted to pick it up. I wanted to know that I owned my copy. So if you are interested, and I wouldn't wait too long. There's no sign yet that there's anything where Asmodee is telling One Ring they can no longer publish it, but it would not surprise me if Asmodee starts working on their own Lord of the Rings RPG, and if they do, they will almost certainly tell Free League that they can no longer continue to publish. The rights and the licensing for such works almost always benefits the license holder to be able to say, you no longer are able to publish this work, which means they will publish it. And whether or not Asmodee's version of Lord of the Rings is better than Free League, who knows? But I know I want my copy of the Free League version of the One Ring, so I bought it. I bought a physical copy. It's actually with a friend of mine because my friend Joe hauled I bought a bunch of stuff at Gamehole Con, and my friend Joe was driving. So I asked him if he would haul the stuff for me because he had a booth at Gamehole Con. And I was like, could you haul my stuff? So he's actually got a copy. But I know he's got my copy of the One Ring, and I got the PDF for it. I wouldn't wait too long. It's very possible that they will have a sale over at Free League come Black Friday. So, and I bet you they'll still have copies then. I bet you the license is not going to fall. But Black Friday, you may seriously think about going and picking up some fine Free League products. In fact, I wouldn't just hold on the One Ring. There's other stuff that Free League makes that's really, really great. Dragonbane. I'm going to talk about Dragonbane a little bit. I've talked about it before. I really like that too. But if you want to pick up some awesome Free League products, I bet you on Black Friday, it's going to be really good. But I wouldn't wait on the One Ring because I'm worried. I'm worried about what they're going to do. Speaking of sales, in case you haven't spent enough money yet, Chaosium, the publishers for Call of Cthulhu, have a sale going on DriveThru RPG right now. I don't know how long this sale is going to last. I'm hoping that it lasts at least when the show is published. So they have 30% off basically all of their products, including all of your Cthulhu products, including the Call of Cthulhu starter set, which you can get for $7 in PDF. That seems like a really good deal if you're interested in Call of Cthulhu and you want to see what that system runs like. Anyway, not quite as good as what you get from like a bundle of holding or a humble bundle, but certainly pretty good rates if you wanted to try out any Chaosium products. You wanted to take a look at what they've got. They have a lot of really good stuff. So, and it's a general horror sale. It is not just Chaosium specific, I understand. So I haven't seen what other publishers are publishing what, but pretty much everything that Chaosium has is for sale right now. So you may want to take a look at that. There's a new crowdfunding campaign by Evil Hat. Evil Hat is the publisher of Blades in the Dark and Fate and many other really awesome independent role-playing game products. And they are publishing a new 4-book set called Origins, written by Shannon Appelkline. Shannon Appelkline is a historian and researcher who has written books previously about the history of D&D and is now writing this 4-book set that is covering the history and origin of many of the products that were released from 1971 to 1995, including the original D&D, AD&D, Holmes version, BX, BCMI, Black Box Mystara, and more. So each of these books is covering the specific histories of these specific products that have come out for it. It's going to be available both in physical volumes and in digital volumes. It is being crowdfunded right now on BackerKit. You can find a link down to the crowdfunding campaign below. If you want to dive into the history of D&D, get another angle on all of the things that have been published for this outstanding game that we love, and it includes a single click free download so that you can take a look at what they got. You want to take a look at what's going on. Take a look how it's written. There's a really awesome 57-page sample that you can get for free. So it looks really good. I haven't backed it yet, but I'm going to back it, and I'm going to back it for I want the digital versions of the book so that I can read them on my digital devices. So it looks really good. I have to be more careful about getting physical books because my bookshelves are getting really, really full. I bought way more RPG products in the last year, and I put all new shelves in my office and then immediately started filling them. So I need to be careful. Anyway, looks really cool. That is the Origins series of books that are histories of Dungeons & Dragons in the earliest days of Dungeons & Dragons to about the early 90s. Very cool. Glass Cannon. Glass Cannon is a live play streaming show where they played RPGs in the past, and they have just started a new campaign for Shadowdark. They had their Shadowdark Session 0 this past week, and were very kind to mention Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master and I believe some of the house rules that I've used for Shadowdark in their work. So they are familiar with my work, and that's great to hear. Always nice when a big streaming show mentions anything that I'm doing. Very, very cool, very fun. So if you want to see a new streaming series to watch people playing through Shadowdark, that is the Glass Cannon show, where they are doing their new Shadowdark RPG campaign. Really fun. I haven't had a chance to listen to the full episode. I just went and listened to the parts where they talk about me. But it looks really, really cool. And people that have watched it really like it. Project Sigil, the 3D virtual tabletop for Wizards of the Coast, is officially no more. 2 days ago, the D&D staff published a new post on D&D Beyond saying that if we are officially done with Project Sigil. Project Sigil, as you know, was the 3D virtual tabletop first mentioned years ago during 1D&D, where they were going to do a new digital 3D digital virtual tabletop that was going to be released alongside the new 2024 books. They gave it a good shot. Then we found out in March, they laid off 30 of 33 staff members. And at that point, everybody said, well, that's that, right? But they were kind of still doing stuff. They were releasing new unpainted 3D virtual miniatures and stuff like that. They were putting stuff out there. They kind of giving it a shot. But now they have announced that officially it is no more. I don't know that anybody who saw them and heard about them laying off 30 staff members thought that this thing was going to be around for any length of time. I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did until this point, but they are officially shutting it down. But good news for you. If you were one of the few people who had the Gold Dragon, exclusive Gold Dragon miniature, I'm afraid they are not going to send you a free version of that model so that you can self-host it on your own Raspberry Pi so that you can look at it on your phone and do the scrolling and spin the model around and imagine it. No, the Gold Dragon is totally disappearing, but they're going to give you an all-new set of digital dice, which they can then take away later from you as well, because you don't own those dice either. But yeah, so you're going to, if you had a Gold Dragon and you gave a damn about the Gold Dragon, you're going to be able to get a new digital dice set on D&D Beyond as a reward. You know, hey, nothing like replacing one thing that they're going to get rid of with another thing that they're going to get rid of some later time, because you'll never own those digital dice either. I have thoughts. I'll give my thoughts about Sigil. Now that Sigil's like officially done, I don't know that we need to have another big talk about Sigil, and I kind of talked about it before, but I wanted to give a few points out. First of all, I'm kind of making light of it, but I do feel bad for two groups of people. Obviously, a lot of creative people worked on Project Sigil. They had their heart on Project Sigil. They were excited to bring this out as a tool. They were very passionate about it. These are not greedy billionaires that are making this thing. These are real people with real jobs doing real work to try to bring a cool tool to people. And obviously that didn't work out for them or us or anybody else. And I feel certainly bad for them. There are also a lot of people who were super excited about a 3D VTT and thought this was going to be a really cool thing. They spent the time playing with the tool. They beta tested the tool. They tried it out. And now the tool is dead. And I feel bad for them too. So I don't want to make light of the fact that there are real human beings who are affected by this thing. It is really interesting to me that during this time, Tailspire continues to exist. So Tailspire is a 3D virtual tabletop available on Steam, and it was around before Sigil. So like there was a good marker of like, hey, there's something there, and it's still around today. So it survived, right? There was an example of like a 3D virtual tabletop that survived. Now, did it survive? I think obviously it must have survived because they could figure out what the revenue model was. Now, the trick is, I think it's $25 per every player that wants to have it. So you kind of have to convince all your players to spend $25 on it. But you know what we call that? A profitable business model, right? Because the problem with Sigil is they weren't sure how to sell it. They had no idea how they were really going to make money from this thing. Or sure, they had lots of ideas, but obviously none of them panned out. So it's kind of interesting that the largest producer of role-playing game products couldn't make this work when a small independent group did pretty much the same thing, as far as I know. I haven't tried Tailspire myself. And they're still around, right? So that's interesting. So, but that said, and I made this point previously, I still think Sigil was a good idea. So when Wizards of the Coast decided to do Project Sigil and build a 3D VTT, I don't think that was necessarily a bad idea. And the reason why is they're trying something new and trying something different that isn't just another virtual tabletop. Right? So Roll20 already existed, Foundry already existed, Fantasy Grounds already existed, Owlbear Rodeo already existed. There were lots of other VTTs, and they could have just kind of put everything into building a big, super rich VTT and not tried out something very different. But they actually had the capital to attempt something different, and they tried, and it didn't work, and they killed it. I think when you look at that, you're like, well, they at least gave it a shot. That was one. I don't know if I would say like it's a smart thing, but you know, it's an understandable thing. Now, obviously, the big issue with Sigil, which I think a lot of people saw right away, I saw it right away, and I think if you look back, I actually had an opportunity to listen to one of my old shows 2.5 years ago after the summit, and my one of the outputs from the summit was, don't worry about Sigil. So many people thought this is the future of D&D. I heard so many people say, like, the future of D&D is going to be Sigil. That's what all the kids are going to move to Sigil. And I was like, dudes, do not worry about Sigil. And I think if you look back 2.5 years ago, when Sigil, they were beta testing it for the people at the summit, you know, I said, you do not need to worry about it. It's so far in the future, and has so many restrictions on it that you don't need to worry about it. It's not going to affect D&D, right? And here I am. I don't like to say I was right, but I was right about that. And why? The reason that's the case is because it needed like Alienware gaming laptops to run, and every single player needed an Alienware gaming laptop to run. You're never going to get all of your players at scale across the entire hobby to be able to do that. It's too much. So I think that was too much of a stretch. The idea that, oh, everybody's going to have high-end gaming hardware to run their tabletop game, that didn't make any sense. But they did something else that was really smart. Maps. So maps came out for D&D Beyond. And I don't remember exactly when that came out, but it's been out for a little while now. And they started really small. Owlbear Rodeo small. Let's just put a map up. And they have been slowly adding new features as they go. Very small, very subtle, very slow features, starting with the simplest implementation they have and then bringing it out. And that's just another 2D VTT. On the complexity scale, it's only slightly above Owlbear Rodeo as a complex RPG. It's very simple. So I think it was smart to put some resources for that, obviously, and I'll get to, how that worked out. And whatever executive, there's always new executives that are going in and out of Wizards, so I'm not really paying attention. But the executives that were in charge back then didn't make the move of saying, why the hell are we doing maps? We should only have one VTT, and it should be the 3D one because that's our moonshot. It would have been very easy for them to say, we're never doing a lightweight VTT. But instead, they hedged their bet. And it was a smart move to hedge their bet. And we know it's a smart move because maps got mentioned in the last quarterly earnings call for Hasbro. They answered one of the questions about maps. And they said that maps specifically is responsible for a big gain of new users going to D&D Beyond. So it turned out maps was a really good idea. And I guarantee you it's got to be cheaper than it was to try to do the 3D VTT. So in the end, they did do something like make a regular VTT, but it turned out that worked, and it turned out that that's working well for them now. Pretty smart choice and a pretty good tool. You hear me complain all the time about sort of centralized tools that we don't really own, that you can't get it. Virtual tabletops like this, I'm not so against them, right? Because this is an actual service that you're using. It is free for people to use. It's a way to connect. I don't like the idea of, quote unquote purchasing, which is actually, purchasing limited licenses to products that can be taken away from you. I don't like that at all. I don't mind paying for a service that's offering a service for you that, one day won't be there, right? You don't hear me complain a lot about Roll20. You don't hear me complain a lot about, other Owlbear Rodeo, right? Owlbear Rodeo is a hosted application that one day could go down. There's actually an Owlbear Rodeo 1.0 that you can run self-hosted. And I still think applications like Foundry are a better bet because you can actually own your copy of Foundry regardless of what happens to the company. So I still think that like Foundry is sort of a better, more long-term, stable answer. But I'm not too opposed to something like maps. And actually it makes a lot of sense for maps because you can integrate the adventures that you buy a limited license for directly into maps so that you can then use it when you're running online. If I was running primarily D&D 2024 games using D&D 2024 published adventures, I would almost certainly be doing it on D&D Beyond with maps because that whole integration of that application seems really good. I just have to remember I don't actually own anything and that it can be taken away at any time. So anyway, that's kind of the end of Sigil, right? I think we've kind of ended Sigil. I think it was worth a shot. I feel bad for the people that worked on it, that really loved it. I feel bad for the people that tried it and really loved it, or that really expected it to be a good thing and really loved it. I think it was super smart for them to hedge their bet with maps. And now it's very clear that maps is really kind of the future for the virtual tabletop because they mentioned it in the quarterly earnings call. My friend Rich Lescaflair made a new tabletop role-playing game. Rich Lescaflair is the creator for the game Esper Genesis, a science fiction-based 5e game that I often recommend and think is really good. And Rich is a huge fan of Phantasy Star. He loves the Phantasy Star brand. If you're not familiar with Phantasy Star was Sega's kind of answer to the Final Fantasy and the Dragon Quest sort of games back in the 80s. And for the Sega Master System was the first one to have Phantasy Star. I played it on Phantasy Star. I played Phantasy Star on the Sega Master System. I played it also on the Phantasy Star 2 on the Sega Genesis. I was a big Phantasy Star fan as well. And so was Rich. Rich liked it very much too. So he reached out to Sega of America, and then eventually reached out to Sega of Japan to work on getting the license to be able to make a Phantasy Star role-playing game. And it was quite a bit of work for him to finagle all that together. And then he got the license, and then he made the Phantasy Star tabletop role-playing game. And now it is available for sale. Phantasy Star tabletop role-playing game is a single volume, 5e based and somewhat 5e compatible role-playing game in a single volume, 228 pages, that takes the high science fantasy of Phantasy Star and brings it to our 5e games. It is a beautiful book, tremendous artwork, really, really good looking artwork, tremendous layout. Rich Lescaflair is a fantastic layout guy, fantastic designer in general. He's one of these unicorns that can do everything. And, he's an independent publisher, does his own layout, does his own game design, works for a lot of other companies, and works for himself as well. And, you can see all of his skills manifested in this awesome game. So as I mentioned, it is a 5e based role-playing game, but it has some elements to it that are definitely unique to this game. So, and some examples of those. So I have definitely flipped through it, but I reached out to Rich to ask him what are some of the specific things that he would want noted about this implementation. But you can see the artwork, right? The artwork is really, really good. Species get additional traits as they level. So when you pick a species, you get new things as you go. There are variant rules to give them environmental traits based on where they're from or their planet of origin. Skills have ranks instead of just simply adding a proficiency. So there's no proficiency bonus. Instead, there are other things that are added to kind of boost things up to make the math work, but they're more based on the skills that you choose and skill rankings and the professions that you pick. So professions, which are their definition of classes, they have specific attack bonuses and tech bonuses that they use instead of proficiency bonuses. So he broke proficiency bonus out and kind of added into several different places to boost it up instead of having this kind of single generic ability or single generic proficiency bonus. The abilities, there are no ability scores. They are ability, flat ability bonuses, which I think every RPG should do. I don't know why. The idea of having ability scores is really weird to me, except in games like Dragonbane where it makes sense because you're rolling under in Dragonbane, but that's a whole different story. So there's only modifiers for ability scores. No, there are no ability scores. There are just ability modifiers. So there's a whole fate point system that you get where you basically add bonus dice to rolls instead of doing the typical kind of inspiration or advantage sort of roll. I think there's still advantage in it, but instead with inspiration, you have these extra dice that you can throw in, almost kind of like a limited dice pool option. So that's cool. You have technique points instead of spell slots. So all of the classes that have sort of techniques that they do, you have a certain amount of technique points that you use. Let me pull up one of the characters here. Oh, and you have a saving throw bonus. That's interesting. So here's an example. The Guardian profession, sort of a hero and defender, has a max tech point. You have tech rankings, which are kind of like your spell slots or your spell levels. Number of techniques known, and your tech points, which are the points that you can expend in order to do these other abilities. So that's very much built around the mechanics that Final Fantasy as a video game had. It's always kind of interesting when you see a game like Final Fantasy or like Phantasy Star. I said Final Fantasy, I meant Phantasy Star. When you have a game like Phantasy Star that's sort of built from the bones of what tabletop role-playing games had, and then coming back into a tabletop role-playing game again, that's always kind of that's always very interesting. Equipment is reworked and has a simplified mastery system. So there were some ideas from D&D 2024 taken in to kind of add weapon masteries, which makes sense from kind of the high fantasy nature of Phantasy Star. I think that works really well. There's also excellent monsters, and one of the things that I complimented Rich on and I like is every monster fits on a single page. So in many cases, the stat blocks are dramatically simplified. You can see that Rich took the same idea that Tales of the Valiant took with her monsters of simply having bonuses. Since there's no ability scores anyway for anybody, all they needed were ability bonuses here for individual monsters. So it makes stat blocks much cleaner, much easier to run. The stat blocks are all built on the monsters that you would find in Final Fantasy, which I like really, which I like a lot. And these are pretty compatible. You could theoretically take these stat blocks and run them in any of your 5e games. That's why I say it's pretty compatible. Do I keep saying Final Fantasy? I meant Phantasy Star. Whenever you hear me say Final Fantasy, what I actually mean is Phantasy Star. So really cool stat blocks from this that you could use in your regular 5e game. So it looks really cool. And, I like these. Hey, look, dark cultists and cult leaders, right? And they still are using challenge rate. These are some high challenge rating guys too. Force Flash, 26 damage a shot. So these dark cultists are pretty powerful. And unlike, say, the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, this one actually has material in it to help you build your own monsters. So he took a Forge of Foes-like approach of having both kind of common creatures from CR0 to CR3 that you can just use as a generic stat block, but then also a table very similar to the one in Forge of Foes, where you can pick monster hit points and you can build stat blocks from any monster from CR0 to CR30, and it tells you how many attacks they get, what kind of damage they do for their attacks, all their various bonuses and everything like that. He included, of course, I think these are all kind of reworked from the ones in Forge of Foes to fit the monsters that he has in Phantasy Star. But it's very cool to have a single volume, single book that lets you not only gives you a big pile of monsters to use, but also gives you the ability to build new monsters. So this is Phantasy Star, new RPG. You can buy the hardcover version or the PDF version. The PDF version, I think, is currently number 3 or number 4 on DriveThruRPG. You can also buy the hardcover directly from the stores where Rich is selling it. And if you email Rich, and I'll put his email address down in the thing. If you email Rich, he will send you the PDF when you have bought the physical version of the book. So you don't automatically get the PDF when you buy the physical version of the book, but he will give you a DriveThruRPG link so that you can add it to the PDF to your library when you pick it up, when you buy the physical book of Phantasy Star. So that is the Phantasy Star tabletop role-playing game by Skydawn Studios, led by Rich Lescaflair. I had an awesome time at Gamehole Con 2025. I wanted to kind of share some of my experiences and some of the things that I learned going to this convention. I've been going to conventions a little less than I normally do. My wife and I used to go to Gen Con and Origins every year. We usually did about 4 cons a year. We're down to about 3 cons a year now. I think this year we're doing 3. We may only go to 2 next year. I'm not sure what cons we're going to next year, but we got other things going on in our lives, and sometimes cons are hard to go to. But boy, I love Gamehole Con, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what I learned about myself going to Gamehole Con. First thing I wanted to talk about is I would totally go again. I will totally go again. So I want to thank the people running Gamehole Con for inviting me as a special guest. It was a wonderful trip. I really enjoyed it, and we had met a lot of awesome people, talked to a lot of old friends, just had a really, really good time at the convention. It's a big convention. I think it was like 6,000 people. So it's bigger than I thought it was. It didn't feel like 6,000 people. It felt like fewer than that in a good way, that it was not hard to get around. I didn't feel overcrowded anywhere. It's in the convention hall is really big, but it's also one of these convention halls where like you're always kind of going through a main central corridor, so you run into a lot of people. So it really felt like the right size, right? It was a lot of people and a lot of games and a lot of stuff going on, but not so big that I felt completely overwhelmed like I often felt like going to Origins or going to Gen Con. I haven't been back to either Origins or Gen Con since COVID. And now they're just bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't know that like that amount of people is a lot of people. Something I learned about myself, and I knew this from my own home games, but I've learned it here too. I really prefer shorter games. That to me, 2-hour and 3-hour RPGs are really what I want to go for. 4-hour games are just too long for me, I have discovered. And I got this because I went to one convention where I played a lot of 4-hour games, and then at Gamehole Con I went and I don't think I played any 4-hour games. Every game I played was 2 to 3 hours long. And I had a much better time with the 2-hour and 3-hour games because, and it's me, right? My own attention. I get tired. My own attention lags. There's something about 4-hour games you really can't fit. You can fit maybe 2 of them into a day. If you try to fit 3, and a lot of people try to fit 3 games into a day with 4-hour games, and that's too much. That's like 14 or 16 hours when you include breaks in between. That's too long. I'm an old man, and that's getting to be too much for me. 2-hour and 3-hour games, I can fit 3 of those into a day pretty easily and feel good about them. And by the time I'm starting to wane, I'm off to another game. So I really, really enjoyed that. I liked running. The funny thing is, I don't mind running 4-hour games. I might switch to 3. I think next con I'm going to run maybe more games and make them 3 hours instead of 4 hours. I ran my Shadowdark adventure called Crypts of Karigulon, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And I think that the nice thing about that game is you can actually shrink it down to 3 hours. And the pacing that I ran that at, and by the way, if there's any folks here or that are listening or that are here on the stream who played in those games, thank you so much. I had a really, really awesome time playing with you guys. I liked it a lot. And both groups got pretty far along in there, which makes me think that I could actually run this game in 3 hours and it would run pretty well. Because Shadowdark is a really fast system. And even with 6 players, I felt like I could move it along. One group finished early. Like one group got through everything and finished early. So I actually think that 3 hours would be a better time, and I'll probably run it there. For me personally, running a game and then taking a day off and then running another game was way better for me than running 3 days in a row with 3 games. When I went to Gamehole Con last year, I completely lost my voice because I was in a loud room, and I was in a loud room this time too. I completely lost my voice by like the second day. And it was really hard for me to go to panels and go to everything else and keep talking. When I took a day between, my voice recovered. That worked really well for me. So if you are having trouble losing your voice, consider taking a day off in between your games. Now, that means you're not running a lot of games. In my case, I literally ran 2 games and I was on 3 panels. And that's not a ton, right? I know people that run tons and tons of games. I don't know how you do it and manage to keep your voice. There's a lot of tricks, but that didn't do it. I like lots of different systems. I love playing lots of different systems. I played at this game, I played Shadowdark, 4 Shadowdark games. 2 of them I ran, 2 of them I played in. I played Pirate Borg once. I played Tales of the Valiant once. I played 2 Dragonbane games, and I played an Eastern Marches game. The Eastern Marches is the organized play program for Gamehole Con, set in any version of 5e that you want to play, I think. But the default characters we played were D&D 2024. That worked out really well. And that's what I love about cons, right? One of the things I love going to the conventions like this one is that there's so many different systems to play. And this is my chance to play them. I would really have liked to play Mothership. I would have loved to play Alien. I would have loved to play Daggerheart. And I didn't get a chance to play any of those. But I got to play a lot of games. And I was very happy with the games I did get to play. It was, so I'm in a lucky position where I know a lot of people in the hobby. I know a lot of other publishers. So when I go to a convention like this, it's an opportunity for me to meet and to, talk to and engage with lots of my friends who go to these same kind of conventions. Gamehole Con was definitely one. I had lots and lots of friends there. I met with them. We hang out. It was a really, really good time. So I very much enjoyed it. I loved running Crypts of Karigulon, and I'll talk a little bit more. So I made some modifications to Crypts of Karigulon. Crypts of Karigulon is my Shadowdark adventure available to Hero Tier subscribers of the Patreon that's specifically designed for timed play. It is an adventure that is built for you to be able to fit it into a very specific time slot. In this case, I ran it as a 4-hour game. I think you could easily run it as a 3-hour game as well. And it's specifically designed so that it will not overrun its time period. And that's because you have a hard line about when this game ends. It ends no matter what. So I made some tweaks, and I'm going to show some of those tweaks when I'm done with my little talk here, but it worked really well. I'm not really into organized play. So I played a Eastern Marches game, and it's fine, but as soon as you hand me a sheet that I have to fill out with all the information about what adventure I played in and what kind of loot I gained, and it feels like doing an income tax form. And I'm not really that big into organized play. I'm just into the play part. I love playing RPGs. And I run a bunch of campaigns. One of the things about organized play that I learned a long time ago is organized play is really like its own version of the hobby. There are people who absolutely love organized play, and that's their primary way they play. And they love having characters that grow, and their story grows with their character, and they go from game to game, and they don't have to play with the same GM, and they're all able to share in this group experience of having played through all these adventures and stuff like that. And I'm totally on board with that. I think that's a great way to play. I'm not knocking it at all. It is not my preferred way to play. There's something about me that I'm, as soon as you get into the kind of organized part, and there's sort of an extra layer of rules that are on there, and there's an extra layer of tracking on there, it's really not my kind of game, which is why I prefer to play a lot of one-shot games when I go to cons like this. I was on 3 panels: the Beautiful Mess of 5e, the Top GM Tips panel, and the Can You Have a Career in the Tabletop RPG or in the tabletop gaming space? Spoiler, the answer is no. That's kind of a joke, but also not really a joke. It was really fun to be on these panels. I really enjoyed them a lot. 2 of those panels I recorded and I put up on the show. The third one I recorded as well. I don't know if I'm going to put that up as a show anytime soon. That was the Can You Have a Career in TTRPGs, but that's not really along the lines of helping GMs run great games. It was a really good panel to be on, and I joked about no because my feeling is, can you get healthcare from the tabletop RPG world? And for 99.9% of the people in there, the answer is no, which to me says that you don't really have a career if you can't get healthcare from it. So, but it was a really fun panel with wonderful panelists, really good discussions. I really liked it a lot. Convention FOMO is a real thing. I learned this. I've known this as long as I've been going to conventions. But even today, you might be like, Mike Shea, you're such a big deal, and you go to conventions and people are saying hello and everybody's talking and you got your stuff. You can't possibly feel FOMO. And I totally do. When I find out that there's a group of friends of mine or other people that I really want to play with and they're playing a game and I'm not there, I get FOMO. And my FOMO is worse when I'm at a convention than when I'm not at a convention. And I've noticed this recently because I've stopped going to Gen Con, and I've stopped going to Origins, and I have friends that go to them and they're playing. But when I'm home, I know I can't be in those games. But the closer I am to the game and I'm not in it, then I get a lot of FOMO. So I had a friend who was running a new game system that he was trying out. I met my friend and got to talk to him, and that was fantastic, but our schedules didn't align, so I couldn't be in the game. But then I heard from somebody who was in the game and they talked about how awesome it was. I was like, I can't believe I missed that game, right? That's ridiculous. So, that's a big issue. So really what I recommend is love the ones you're with, right? That when you are able to play in a game, if you can't get to a convention, but you're still playing games, you're doing fine, right? If you are at a convention, enjoy the games you're playing more than worrying about the games you're not playing. Like, I think that's really important. And I go back to, there's always an inner ring. There's always a group of people you think have their own like inner circle, and you really wish you were inside their inner circle. Worry less about their inner circle and think about the circle of friends that you've got that you can hang out with, because those are the ones that really matter to you. You trying to get into a circle of people because you think it's like, oh, that they're so great. Their group is not any better than the group that you're in. So go and enjoy the group that you're in, right? That's a big one. And again, special thanks to Alex Kammer, who runs Gamehole Con, for the invitation to bring me out there as a special guest. It was a really, really good time. I absolutely loved it. Can't wait to go again. And thanks to Chad for the taco social. Chad set up a taco social where he had a camper that he put out, and he invited folks from the Mastering Dungeons podcast and other kind of fans, and I was invited as well. And I got to enjoy some tacos and just chill out, which is something I really needed, right? And I'll get to this in a bit. My feelings, I continue to reinforce the feeling that the game system to me matters less than the GM and the players that I'm with when I'm playing a game. The kind of setting in the world matter to me. But the mechanics of the game, like if you squint, they're the same thing. You're rolling dice, and the dice are kind of determining things that are going on. It's rare for me to find a system where what you're doing is so different that the game feels completely different to me. I worry a lot less about the system that I'm playing these days, and a lot more about the stories that are being told, the players that are there, the GM that's there. There are definitely systems where like this one is definitely crunchier and takes longer, and this one is lighter. And I definitely prefer the lighter systems for con games. But generally what I notice, and I've noticed this in a few conventions that I've been to recently, is like if I squint, they're all the same. Like really, they're all the same and they're all great, right? And that's why I don't like have this, oh my God, I hate System X and I love System Y and I can't imagine why everybody doesn't play System Y and I can't imagine why anybody's playing System X. I have nothing like that, right? For me, it's like whatever system you love, I love. Like you're good. You and I are good. With whatever game you love, we're good. And I don't have a lot of patience when I hear people like, oh, 5e's awful. 5e's the worst system ever. This is the worst. And you're like, come on. You know how many people are playing it, right? It wouldn't suck that bad if that many people are playing it. And, meanwhile, System Y is this system. Like I'm done with kind of edition wars on this stuff, right? I love all these games. I love all of them. Pirateborg is awesome. And Dragonbane is awesome. And D&D 2024 is awesome. And Tales of the Valiant is awesome. All the games. Shadowdark is awesome. I love all these games, right? I love all of them. I don't care if they're old school or new school. They're just fun. Like all these games are just fun. One thing is, I do recommend, like, if you can, go with a partner, right? If you're going to a convention, go with somebody. And I think it really works well to go with one other person and kind of sign up. It could be a friend of yours, just somebody that you're kind of connected to so that you have somebody to go to dinner with, so that you got somebody who has your back if you need some help with something. If you go with too many people and it becomes kind of logistically challenging, but that can still work. 3, 4, 5 people. It can kind of work if you carefully coordinate it. But it really is nice to go with a partner. And thank the gods for Michelle, right? My wife and I have been going to gaming conventions for close to 20 years now. And so it's really nice that the two of us can both go. One of us can go get lunch for the other while one's in a game if we pack things up. It really, really helps. But I think that works out. One thing I noticed is when I hit Thursday night, I'd been going pretty strong all week. Thursday night, I just kind of hit a wall and I went back to the room. I had a big 2-hour, 3-hour break between games. And I went back to my room and I just put on some Neil Young and I just put my headphones on and I just laid back and just chilled out. And I needed to I'm going to call it like defragging, right? I needed the kids these days say they're out of spoons. I was out of spoons, right? My spoon, I don't know. They've left them all over the place. And I needed to reset and I just had to get in a quiet place and listen to something relaxing and not see 1,000 people and not be talking nonstop and just chill. And, luckily for me, I had the opportunity to do that. Sometimes people get stuck in situations they can't do that, but think about giving yourself a recharge time because I definitely needed it. One thing, and I felt this way at the last Gamehole Con too, there's a scene in the movie Almost Famous where the lead character for Almost Famous is a young kid who's writing for Rolling Stone magazine about a rock band. And there's a scene where he's backstage at a Black Sabbath concert and it's his first time backstage at any concert. And he's talking to all these people and he's meeting the groupies, he's meeting the roadies and he's meeting the bands and he's talking it. And he's clearly been there for all the time. And at the end, he's walking around and he's like pointing fingers at everybody and saying, "Hey, Rusty, it was great to meet you. Hey, John, it was great to meet you." Yeah, I know. And it's totally Cameron Crowe. Cameron Crowe is the guy who directed it. He was also lived that life. And there's a new autobiography by Cameron Crowe that's apparently coming out where he talks about this thing. But that scene where he's walking around and he went from being like the guy who couldn't get in the door to like knowing everybody. And he's clearly like feels like he's inside, right? He's fine. Like he's part of the industry now. And he's 15, right? And he's walking around and he's like, "Hey, John, yeah, it's great. Hey, Susie, great to see you again. Bye, Rusty." Right? I felt a little like that like after a certain amount of time, you've seen all these people so long, you're walking around and you're like, "Oh, hey, how's it going? Hey, and kind of waving to everybody and talking to everybody. And that was really fun. The last thing I'll offer is one really cool feature that Gamehole Con had was that every table had a large Chessex mat on it. So I've become a big fan of the Chessex mat. I brought my wet erase markers, but I also brought my Paizo flip mat. I did not need the Paizo flip mat because we had big Chessex mats on every single gaming table in the place. I don't know how many of them were owned. Maybe 1,000 Chessex mats. It wouldn't surprise me if there were 1,000 Chessex mats at this thing. Some of them, though, definitely needed the Teos Abadia, some Teos Abadia shower time. They definitely, these Chessex mats had seen some use. They've had hard lives. And they definitely needed some special secret rituals to clean them What's the Teos Abadia shower time? Somebody asked. When I was reviewing Chessex mats and going over all of the fun rituals that people have for how to properly clean your Chessex mat, my favorite one was from Teos Abadia, who said he showers with his Chessex mat because the humidity from the shower really sinks into the mat and all of the ink rolls off, and like you super clean it because it's like in a super humid environment. So you hang your shower. I will admit, I've tried it. I didn't inhale, but I did try cleaning the Chessex mat in the shower to see if that would work. Really good time at Gamehole Con. Thanks again for those who invited me out there. Thank you again for saying hello. I said hello to a ton of people. It was really nice to meet a lot of folks. Many people had many kind words to say. It was really, really awesome time. So thank you for that. And if you have the opportunity to go to Gamehole Con, I would definitely recommend it. So I mentioned in my talk about Gamehole Con that I ran my adventure Crypts of Karigulon. Crypts of Karigulon I released a little while ago. And this is the first time I've run it. Other people have run it, and I got a lot of good feedback from folks. But I also now have run it myself twice, and I made some changes to it. The biggest change is I cut about 50% of the text. So Crypts of Karigulon is now only 2 pages long. It is 1 sheet of paper printed front and back. I like that because it makes it super usable at a convention. You have 1 sheet of paper printed front and back. You can flip it over and off you go. So the big parts that I cut, and then talk about murdering your darlings, I cut secrets and clues. I got rid of the secrets and clues. The reason why is I felt like between the background and the intro text, there was enough information for GMs to kind of get what they needed if they needed to fill things out. But the other big reason is you're running fast. You're running this game quick. And there's not a lot of time to dump a lot of secrets and clues. The players don't really want you dumping a lot of secrets and clues because they're on a clock, right? I also changed the clock a little bit to make it more flexible for different times. So before I kind of talked about a 4 hours that was intended for a 4-hour session. Now I've said that basically here's how you can tailor it for any session. 30 minutes before the end of the session, darkness descends. And then at the end of the session is when the mountain devours the crypts and everything is destroyed. That's how this scenario works. So the scenario idea is the characters are going to a crypt that's about to be destroyed by a mountain that eats crypts, right? This is the mountain from City of Arches. Crypts go deeper and deeper into the mountain, and then they're eaten up by like a big machine at the end, kind of. The mountain just devours them and destroys them completely. The characters have been sent here to recover up to 6 artifacts from this crypt before it is destroyed. And 30 minutes before it gets destroyed at the end of your play session. So if you're playing 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, when they hit the end of that time, that's when the crypt is destroyed. 30 minutes before that happens, darkness descends because of Shadowdark. All light goes out, and now you've got to get out of the crypt. It's really hard to light it, and you have to get out of the crypt before the crypt is destroyed. And now there's a werewolf avatar of Karigulon named Bloodstroke who is hunting you down at the same time. So you got kind of a boss monster to find out. So I changed some of the stuff here. I killed secrets and clues. I modified the encounters a little bit. I had a couple of little typos that I fixed. One of the things that I recommend, and I described in here, I managed to kind of shorten the text for this, is about the 6 relics and where they're located. So what you do is for each of the relics, you roll a D10, and that tells you where that relic appears. And what I did is right next to the crypt locations area, I would write in the number of which relic appears in which location. And that way, and I did that beforehand. I did a tiny little bit of prep beforehand, so I knew where the relics were in the map. And you can always change it. You probably want to have a couple of relics in the uppermost area, a couple of relics in the lower right area, and then a couple relics in the lower left area, or in the far left area. That way, they're spread out enough that you're not going to have all the relics in one place and things are going to be too short. One other thing that I changed a little bit of the spells that were here. There's a couple spells that were, like the Hold Person was a weird one. So I got rid of Hold Person and turning it into Burning Hands as well. So each of these kind of has a fun power. I also put in here that when the last relic, darkness descends in 2 circumstances, either 30 minutes before the session is going to end, or when the characters retrieve the 6th relic. So that way, if your group is really quick and they manage to collect all 6 relics, that's when darkness descends, and now they have to get out before Bloodstroke, the werewolf, destroys them. So that can kind of set a new timer so that they have to get out. And that way the urgency is still there, and they're not like, hey, we can sit and relax because we got all 6 relics and we still have an hour left on the timer, right? That's definitely something you want to look at. So I thought it worked. I mean, not to pimp my own adventure or to talk about it, but I thought it worked really well. I had a really good time running it. It worked very well. I made a couple little tweaks to it, but I'm very happy with these tweaks. I really like the idea that it's now on a single sheet of paper. So I like that a lot. If you want to pick up Crypts of Karigulon, you can do so by becoming a hero tier subscriber of the Sly Flourish Patreon. You get access to not only Crypts of Karigulon, but 15 scenarios for City of Arches. You get the Readings and Reflections podcast. You get a lot of awesome stuff, plus everything you get at the veteran tier, including the 5e artisanal database and everything else. You get lots and lots of stuff for becoming a patron of Sly Flourish. And Crypts of Karigulon is one of the things you get for being a hero tier subscriber of Crypts of Karigulon. But it was a really fun time. So thanks to all of my players who got to play in my Crypts of Karigulon adventure. I hope you had a good time. I know I did. Every quarter on the Sly Flourish Patreon, we do the Sly Flourish Patreon Q&A. I put up a new thread, and once a month, each patron can put up a RPG-related question onto that Q&A. Every Friday, I answer all of the questions that I've accumulated throughout the week. Some of those questions I bring here to the show so we can dive in deeper. Kyle asks, recently, I used ChatGPT for the first time ever to get some campaign inspiration. I'm rather busy with kids, wife, work, and other hobbies. I find creating campaigns and adventures difficult with my limited time and somewhat limited creative powers. So I turned to ChatGPT, and the results it spewed forth were amazing. I was pumped. A short while later, I was telling one of my players about it, and he immediately made it clear in no uncertain terms that he wanted nothing to do with ChatGPT, and he wouldn't be playing anything touched by it. I told him he already had, and that I often Google a rules dispute or spell clarification mid-game. I used the search result provided by Gemini. He didn't have much to say other than he doesn't use Google. Our conversation was interrupted by dinner being served, and neither of us really picked it up again. Our summer gaming hiatus will be up soon, and I'm somewhat unsure of how to proceed. Do I concede to him his firm stance on the subject, or do what I feel I'm comfortable with for the table experience and let him decide if he wishes to continue? For what it's worth, I live in rural Canada where players are tough to come by. I thought this was, the whole world is dealing with the, oh my God, what are we doing about generative AI, right? The whole world is dealing with this question everywhere. It comes up constantly. We have a whole dedicated channel to it on the Sly Flourish Discord server where we dive into it. And the range of opinions is completely across the gamut from, I don't ever want to touch anything that's ever been touched by generative AI in any regards at all, to I use this all over the place for my whole life and it's completely life-changing and I can't imagine ever not using it again. And then lots of stuff in between. This one is an interesting question because it's one of the areas where our opinions on it actually clash. My personal opinion is I am not there to judge somebody else's use of it. There are certain uses of it, and they're definitely like, I'm no fan of the billionaires, right? There are certain places where I think it actually is directly harmful to people, and I certainly have opinions to that. But when it comes to like our RPG experiences and stuff like that, I feel like each of us has to make our own choice about how we feel about this technology and what we're comfortable with. And I'm not going to be judgmental about, I know that there are people who would judge me on my feelings on it. So I also don't want to judge other people for their feelings on it in either direction. So if there are people who are like, hey, and I have friends who say this, I use generative AI and ChatGPT and stuff for my games all the time, and I find it really useful for brainstorming, and it really helps me organize my thoughts, and it gives me lots of ideas, and it's a really good tool to help me kind of turn on this stuff on one side. And then other people who say I never want to have anything to do with AI on the other side. Just like RPG systems, I'm kind of on both. I'm good with both of those, right? The opinions each of us have on this thing, but sometimes our opinions on this are going to clash, right, with other people. That we're going to have circumstances where you're like, you may be okay with that, but I don't know that I'm necessarily okay with that. And how do we deal with that? So this is a tough one. I am going to lay on my own personal opinions about the use of generative AI with RPGs in this circumstance, because you did ask me about it. I personally don't find it, not only do I not find it particularly useful for campaign planning, I also feel like it takes away the part of campaign planning that we ought to be doing on our own. And I think there are other tools that we can use that give us lots of good ideas to build campaigns out and build adventures out and brainstorm our systems that aren't built on generative AI. And those are random tables and campaign source books and adventures, published adventures, campaign source books, and random tables. Those are 3 sets of tools, and other human beings, right? How about instead of artificial intelligence, we use real intelligence, and we meet with other GMs and we talk online and we brainstorm ideas with actual other GMs. We have a thing called the DM Workshop over on the Patreon. The DM Workshop is a great way to be like, hey, I've got some ideas for my game, and I would love for you to work with me on it. So I feel like those tools are better at building strong connections in our heads for the kind of stuff that we want to do in a campaign. So if you have a player who's like, I really don't want to be playing adventures that you've been generating with ChatGPT, one of your ideas, one of the things you could go with was, okay, I'm going to try to find other approaches to do that. And I get that you're busy, right? I get you're busy with kids, wife, work, and other hobbies and things like that. I understand. But one of the things that I try to focus on is, you know what? It doesn't have to be as hard as we think it has to be. And that's why, like, for campaign planning, you don't need to do a lot. 2 pages can build out a good campaign for a long time, right? Big ideas, who are the main villains? What are the quests they're working on? What's the central theme of the campaign? What are the truths? And then after that, you're just focusing on your sessions. And I feel like I certainly do not feel like I am spending a lot of extra time prepping sessions that an LLM would be helping me with. In fact, I think I would be spending far more time deconstructing the nonsense that it's spitting out than I would if I just did it myself. So I have that feeling on it. The question of, and I'll hit on one other thing you had here, because when you say that when you have a rules dispute, you go to Gemini's going to suck at rules disputes. I would never trust an LLM on something like a rule. I would go and read the book, go find the rule and go read it. Because it makes stuff up all the time, right? I sort of have these like head rules for LLMs, and like what the definitions of them are, sort of like how do I get my hands around what they do. One of them is it's a $20 billion industry in a $1 trillion suit, right? We have overestimated their capabilities so much. I mean, all of my investments are going to be dropping by like 50% sometime. Like I'm waiting for it to happen, right? I'm waiting for the world to realize that all of this generative AI stuff isn't making nearly as much money as everybody is pretending it is. It's not making trillions of dollars. It's a $20 billion in a $1 trillion suit. It's going to pop, and it's going to pop bad. I'm kind of hoping the good parts of it are still around when it's done. I have that feeling about it. Feeling number 2, generative AI is really good at giving you custom average answers with a 20% error rate. So if you're good with average answers with a 20% error rate that are tailored around the question you ask, then they can work fine. But I feel like that's still pretty strong, right? The idea that the error rate is going to get less than 20%, I wouldn't count on it. Like, you ask it the right things and maybe you can get better results than that. But the whole thing is built on giving average answers, right? That's where it's getting its data from. It's averaging out all of the world's knowledge and giving you average results in the end. So when you say you came up with amazing results, I kind of doubt it. I bet you got amazing ideas from average answers that it was spitting out. And then my third one is show me what people are using generative AI on, and I'll show you stuff they don't actually care about, right? If the idea is I'm too busy to spend the time working on campaign planning, well, there are other things that are obviously more important to you than campaign planning. The question is, like, what are the parts that you want to be spending your time on, and how do you spend your parts on those important things? If it's important, you will get good answers from it, right? You'll do the work, right? It's when this is my belief, and a lot of people argue with me about this and say you're wrong, including my wife, Michelle, doesn't think this is accurate. But I really feel like the minute we've started going to LLM is the time we're looking for a shortcut, right? We're looking for a shortcut to something. And we're also going to get shortcuts and not really learn. And that's why I think like reading source books, reading adventures, and using random tables to help spur our own imagination, that's the stuff that's going to help us long term. Where kind of getting regurgitated results from massive LLMs, I don't think it's as valuable. But again, I'm not telling you what you find valuable. If you think it's valuable to you, it's not up to me to tell you it's not. Right? I am offering like, hey, there's other ways, right? There are other things that you could potentially do. But I would, so the hard part with this one is you were into it, but you have a player who's not. You're going to have to make a choice, right? And the choice is, do you talk to your player and say, hey, is there a middle ground? Or is there a way that you can do the things that you want to do, but in a way that he's still happy with the results? Can you just not talk about it, right? Like, is it sort of a, I won't mention it and you don't mention it kind of circumstance? I don't know. I wouldn't lie to him, right? I think that would be bad, but it could be a situation where they just don't want to know, right? They don't want to know that you're doing it. That's really something that you're really going to have to figure out, but it's a tough one. And there is a reason why I brought this question here, because this is one of those circumstances where it's not just you making a choice for what works for you. It's also the conflict between you and what you've got going on with other players. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today while we talked about all things in tabletop role-playing games. If you enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You get a free adventure generator for signing up, and you get a free RPG-related email sent directly to your inbox every week. You can also join the Sly Flourish Patreon. Patrons get access to tips, tricks, tools, and sources and all kinds of things to help you run your RPGs. If you join at the Hero tier, you also get a dedicated Readings and Reflections podcast. All patron members get access to our awesome dedicated Discord server, and you help directly support me to put on shows like this. And you can pick up any of my books, including Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, The Lazy DM's Companion, The Lazy DM's Workbook, Forge of Foes, and more at the Sly Flourish bookstore. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.